They tried to bury you, but instead they built your launch pad. Now they're watching you fly over their heads, and they can't even look up without choking on the dust. That's the truth, chosen one. For years, they threw shade, rumors, and obstacles, thinking it would crush you. But what they were really doing was pressing down on a spring. And the thing about a spring is, the more it's pushed, the higher it launches when it's released. Think of a volcanic island. For centuries, nothing but water, then a sudden eruption forms new land that changes the map forever. That's you. The universe had you in what looked like hiding, but it was staging. A Harvard Business School study found that companies which quietly build infrastructure during downturns outperform their rivals dramatically when the economy rebounds. It's the same principle in your life. Your silent seasons weren't punishment, they were your private R&D department. And thank you, chosen one. Don't forget to press the like and subscribe to help spread this message to more souls. It's our responsibility to spread the light, to reach others walking this same path. You are part of a force now, not just an audience. Your engagement turns this from a video into a movement. So thank you for being here, for being a part of this mission, for reflecting this energy back out into the world. Now back to why you clicked this. Chosen one, whatever you did, it worked. You won. It's already yours. This isn't a prediction. This is a reality you're stepping into. You're not waiting for the green light. You already passed the finish line while they were still at the starting blocks. The shift isn't coming. It has come. Your quiet work, your restraint, your patience, your refusal to lower yourself, all of it has matured into a kind of power that can't be faked. The same people who dismissed you as naive are now studying your moves like an algorithm they can't crack. They're replaying your decisions in their heads, asking themselves how you pulled it off, but they can't reverse engineer authenticity. You are living proof that the universe rewards endurance. You've crossed from hoping into owning. The things you prayed for, planned for, and sweated for are not on the way. They're already on your table. Look around. Look at the subtle changes. The way opportunities approach you instead of you chasing them. The way conversations tilt in your favor. The way your presence alone now feels like leverage. These aren't coincidences. This is the compound interest of every hidden investment you made in yourself when no one was watching. And just like compound interest, it looks like nothing for years and then suddenly explodes into exponential growth. Right now, you're in that explosive phase. The universe has already signed off on the delivery. The package is marked non-returnable. The people who thought they had time to catch up are realizing the race is over. Some of them will pretend to celebrate you, but inside they're panicking because nothing terrifies someone who tried to bury you more than seeing you thrive without them. That's why their reactions feel mixed. Applause on the surface, envy underneath. But don't mistake their noise for your measure. Their disbelief is just proof of your breakthrough. This is what winning looks like when it's real. It's not about a trophy or a viral moment. It's about that deep inner shift when you stop waiting for permission and start walking like it's already yours. It's about that calm that shows up when you realize you're the storm. When bamboo shoots finally break the surface, it grows 90 feet in weeks. But that's not magic. That's years of unseen rooting exploding into visible reality. That's you. That's this moment. So as you listen today, keep this in mind. You're not entering the fight. You're walking into the aftermath of a fight you've already won. This is not a pep talk about one day. This is confirmation of right now. The signs are already around you. People you never expected are reaching out. Doors you didn't knock on are opening. Your energy is magnetic, your presence commanding. And yes, it unsettles them. It should, because for the first time, they're seeing the full picture. You didn't just survive, you ascended. This message is here to anchor you in that truth. You're not imagining it. You're not overhyping yourself. This is the moment when the seed becomes the forest. When the spring launches, when the launch pad fires, everything you did worked. You won. It's already yours. And nothing, not rumors, not sabotage, not delay, can undo what has been set in motion. And Chosen One, pause here for a second. Look at where you are right now. You're not on this message by accident. You're here because whatever you did, it worked. You won. It's already yours, and this space exists to remind you of that truth. Thank you for showing up, for being part of this force, for being one of the souls who refuses to shrink after a breakthrough. Drop a comment below the number 777 if you feel this confirmation in your bones and you're ready to walk into what's already yours. And if you can, bless the team behind this message with a super thanks, because every bit of support, whether it's a single cent or something larger, fuels the work of getting these truths to more people like you. You're not just watching, you're helping to spread a movement that lifts others out of the dark. This is how we build momentum together. So take a breath, lock in, and let this energy settle. The next part is where it gets even deeper. Chosen One, stay with me, because you're about to see exactly how to stand fully in what you've already claimed. Let's begin. Number 1. They prayed for your collapse, but you rose like a fortress from their ashes. They tried to script your downfall, but all they wrote was the blueprint for your empire. They didn't just want you to struggle, they needed you to collapse. They built their hope on your pain, invested their confidence in your failure, and sat back to watch you crumble like a collapsing building. They whispered, "Any day now." They studied your cracks and missteps like vultures circling, waiting for a last breath. And yet, here you are, not only standing, but towering. Let that burn into their eyes. The fortress they're staring at now is built entirely from the ashes they left you in. This is the part they'll never admit out loud, that your pain wasn't an accident. It was a plan. The betrayals, the rumors, the delays, the silent tests, all of it designed to break your rhythm. They thought pressure would snap you like a cheap twig. But what they forgot is that pressure makes diamonds, and you didn't just survive the squeeze, you became untouchable in it. Every insult was another brick, every loss was another beam. Every heartbreak was another cornerstone. They weren't just feeding you pain, they were handing you the raw materials to your kingdom. And maybe you've wondered, Chosen One, why me? Why so many setbacks? Why did it feel like the world was conspiring to crush me? Here's the answer they'd never want you to realize. The very weight they thought would bury you became your gym. You were being trained for strength they can't imagine. You were being forced to grow roots so deep no storm could rip you out. The universe was building your endurance while they thought they were building your coffin. While they laughed at your silence, you were mastering strategy. While they assumed your absence meant defeat, you were gathering wisdom like ammunition. You didn't just heal, you upgraded. You didn't just endure, you evolved. You were transforming in plain sight, but because they couldn't see instant results, they misread your patience as weakness. They forgot that bamboo takes years to root before it explodes skyward. They forgot that volcanoes look dormant before they reshape continents. They forgot that the most dangerous moves are made quietly. They believed isolation would starve you, but it became your laboratory. They believed heartbreak would paralyze you, but it became your handbook. They believed no applause would crush your spirit, but it made you unstoppable. You learned to lead yourself without a map, without a cheerleader, without anyone clearing the path. You became self-made not by choice, but by necessity. And now, the irony is this. The very people who refuse to stand with you have no idea how to stand against you. You see, Chosen One, your power was never loud. That's why they underestimated it. They equated silence with surrender. They equated calm with defeat. But your power was always deep, steady, and surgical. You didn't waste energy shouting at walls. You built doors they can't unlock. You didn't retaliate on their level. You rose to a level they can't reach. That's why it worked. That's why you're standing where you are right now. And now they're looking at you like you cheated. How did they do it? They whisper. Who helped them? But no one helped you. You helped yourself. Your wins weren't handed out like charity. They were forged like steel. This isn't luck. This is math. This is cause and effect. This is what happens when you refuse to break and instead turn every loss into leverage. And because your glow arrived without fanfare, it's hitting them harder. You didn't need a victory parade. You let your transformation announce itself, and now your silence is deafening them. Think about this. A fortress doesn't grow overnight. It's built stone by stone, unseen by the crowd, until the walls tower high enough to block the sun. That's what you did. While they were watching for your breakdown, you were stacking invisible wins. While they waited for you to drown, you learned to breathe underwater. While they tried to erase you, you were engraving your name into reality itself. And now, as you rise, they can't deny it. They can only scramble for explanations. So when that question creeps up, why did it have to be this hard? Remember this truth. Ease wouldn't have built you. Comfort wouldn't have revealed your reach. A clear path wouldn't have taught you strategy. The pain they meant to break you with was the same pain that forged your backbone, sharpened your instincts, and built your inner compass. Without it, you'd still be waiting for permission. With it, you became undeniable. Now the very ground they tried to bury you under has become the stage you're standing on. The kingdom you built in silence is real, solid, unshakable. And here's the brutal part they can't digest. You didn't even fight them. You simply outgrew them. You transcended the game. They lost not because you attacked, but because you advanced. They lost because while they were hoping you'd break, you were busy learning how to build. This victory is different because it's clean, it's rooted, it's permanent. It didn't come from playing their game dirtier than they did. It came from leaving their game behind entirely. That's why it unsettles them so deeply. They can't retaliate against someone who's not even in the same arena anymore. They can only watch. And that's the sweetest part of your rise. Your win isn't just a headline, it's a mirror. Every time they see you now, they're forced to see themselves, their doubts, their miscalculations, their wasted time. Whatever you did, it worked. You didn't just win, you rewrote the rules. You didn't just survive, you set the standard. You didn't just build a kingdom in the rubble, you built it so high and so quietly that by the time they noticed, it was too late to stop it. That's why you own the game now. That's why you're unstoppable. And that's why, Chosen One, this message exists, not to hype you up with empty promises, but to confirm what you already feel. The shift isn't coming. It's here. So breathe it in, let the truth land. You are the fortress, you are the eruption, you are the living answer to every bet they placed against you. And as they sit in the stands, stunned and silent, remember, their disbelief is just another echo of your victory. Number 2, they couldn't defeat you because you refused to become their reflection. They wanted you to mirror their poison, but you chose to shine as their antidote. That's the part they'll never forgive you for. Not that you survived, not that you thrived, but that you did it without ever becoming like them. They came for your peace, your confidence, your sense of self, and tried every dirty tactic to drag you down into their mud. They wanted you snapping, cursing, retaliating, turning bitter, because that would have justified everything they said about you. But you didn't take the bait. You stayed solid when everything around you was pulling you toward corruption, and that's why they lost. Imagine this. Two fighters step into a ring. One is furious, swinging wild, desperate for a reaction. The other stands calm, measured, focused, refusing to get pulled into the chaos. Who wins? It's never the one burning energy and blind rage. It's the one who refuses to let the opponent set the rhythm. That was you. They wanted you flailing in the dark, but you didn't give them the satisfaction. You stood in your truth, and you let silence sting louder than any insult could. Never wrestle with pigs. You both get dirty, but the pig enjoys it. They were hoping you'd jump into the mud, because that's their natural habitat, but you didn't. And maybe you asked yourself along the way, am I weak for not clapping back? Am I letting them win by staying quiet? The answer is no. That wasn't weakness, it was discipline, it was power under control. If you had retaliated in their style, they would have pointed and said, "See, just like us." But because you refused, because you held your ground, the story ended differently. You exposed them not by fighting, but by outlasting. Here's a fact most people ignore. Integrity is a weapon. In a world where deception is the default, staying real is the sharpest blade you can carry, and you carried it well. You didn't have to manipulate, scheme, or destroy to reach this point. You didn't have to join their circus. You didn't have to trade your character for a cheap win. You rose because you were disciplined enough to protect your energy when everyone wanted you drained. That's not common, that's rare, and that's why it unsettles them so deeply. Your silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. They thought you were passive. They mistook your restraint for weakness. But really, you were calculating, observing, gathering data. You were watching how people moved when they thought you were vulnerable. You let them reveal themselves, and once they did, you didn't argue, you didn't chase, you didn't beg. You simply stepped aside and let their own actions finish the job. You handed them over to the very consequences they were running from. You didn't have to call out names or post receipts. You let time and truth expose them. That's why they're furious now, because you never had to lift a finger to win. Imagine standing on a shoreline while waves crash around you. Others scream, fight, thrash in panic, but you stay calm, you stand still, and soon the waves lose their power. That's how you carried yourself. Their chaos couldn't drown you because you never tried to out-chaos them. You kept your dignity, and that dignity became your shield. And maybe another question rises in your mind, but if I didn't fight them back, does that mean I let them get away with it? Number. That's the trick. They thought they got away with something, but they didn't. You let karma do the heavy lifting. You let the universe send the invoice. And while karma walked through their front door, you were busy preparing for your next level. That's why you're already there. That's why it's yours now. You don't win by playing their game. You win by making their game irrelevant. They were obsessed with short-term battles. Who could humiliate who? Who could score points? Who could outlie, out-scheme, out-slander? That's the world they lived in. But you weren't playing for battles. You were preparing for the whole war. While they were busy clawing for scraps, you were becoming the kind of person who could inherit an empire. They thought they were winning rounds, but you were building endurance. You didn't just win, you transcended. Think of a chess match. One player panics, making flashy moves to look powerful. The other plays quietly, strategically, seeing 10 steps ahead. By the time the flashy player realizes what's happening, the quiet one already has them in checkmate. That was your story. You didn't need to be loud. You didn't need to prove yourself with noise. You simply positioned yourself step by step until the victory was undeniable. And now, Chosen One, look at where you are. You still have your character intact. You still have your dignity. That's the ultimate win, because anyone can claw their way to the top by becoming crueler, louder, nastier. But not everyone can rise without losing themselves. You did. That's why this victory carries weight. That's why it's permanent. Because it wasn't fueled by ego, it was fueled by principle. The loudest revenge is quiet integrity. That's the part that hits them hardest. You didn't just win, you won with class. You didn't just get ahead, you kept your hands clean. You didn't just prove them wrong, you proved yourself right. And in the end, their real punishment isn't even your success. It's that they're stuck being them while you kept being you. They're still trapped in cycles of bitterness, schemes and noise, and you're free. Free to move higher, free to move lighter, free to keep building without looking over your shoulder. So let this truth settle. You didn't win because you fought harder. You won because you fought smarter. You won because you refused to surrender your character. You won because you refused to let bitterness stain you. And that's a kind of win they can never understand, because it's not about attention, applause, or clout. It's about integrity. And integrity always wins in the long run. That's why, Chosen One, whatever you did, it worked. That's why you've already won. Not because you became them, but because you refused to. Number 3. They mistook your silence for stagnation, but you were secretly being crowned. They thought your pause was weakness, but a pause is where the masterpiece gathers its strength. They were watching the calendar, counting days, whispering nothing's happening for them. They mistook your silence for failure. They confused your stillness with defeat. What they couldn't see was that you were in the kind of season that doesn't broadcast progress. Your crown wasn't being forged under spotlights. It was being crafted in the shadows, in the quiet hours where nobody clapped and nobody cared. Imagine an archer pulling back a bowstring. From the outside, it looks like nothing's moving, but the deeper the pull, the greater the release. That was your delay. They thought you were stuck, but you were loading power. They thought the stillness was denial, but it was preparation. Even nature proves this. A seed spends most of its life underground, invisible, before it erupts into something undeniable. And maybe you asked yourself, why is it taking so long? Did I miss my moment? The truth. Number. The universe wasn't ignoring you, it was aligning you. A blessing given too soon is no blessing at all. If a fruit is picked before it's ripe, it rots instead of nourishes. That's why you were held back. So when your time came, nothing could spoil it. Still waters run deep, and yours were carving out oceans. While they rushed to be seen, you were refining your patience, sharpening your boundaries, training your focus. That quiet season stripped you of the need to prove yourself, and that's when the real win began. You stopped begging for doors that weren't yours. You stopped chasing people who were temporary. You weren't just waiting, you were becoming. And now, look around. Doors are opening, not because you kicked them down, but because you're finally the person who belongs on the other side. Everything you thought you lost is catching up like it never left. The delay wasn't denial, it was definition. It carved you into someone unrecognizable, someone undeniable. So let them choke on their misjudgment. Whatever you did, it worked. You weren't delayed, you were crowned in private. Number 4, you took the hits without begging for witnesses, and that's why you terrify them. They wanted your suffering to be a stage show, but you turned it into a silent revolution. Most people bleed loudly, hoping for pity. They make their wounds into trophies, flashing scars just to collect sympathy. But not you. You walked through fire without turning it into theater. You felt every cut, every betrayal, every delay. And instead of collapsing for applause, you stood up with trembling hands and chose to save yourself. That's a level of strength their minds can't wrap around. Imagine a boxer training alone in the dark, throwing punches with no crowd, no cheers, no lights. That was you. You weren't waiting for validation. You were refining yourself when no one was watching. The silence they mistook for weakness was actually surgery. You were cutting out everything that didn't belong. And the fact is, suffering without self-pity is one of the rarest skills alive. Harvard psychologists note that resilience isn't about avoiding pain, but reframing it, and you mastered that art. Pain didn't define you, it educated you. You didn't wear suffering as a costume. You dissected it. You sat with it. You let it teach you instead of destroy you. Where others would have drowned, you learned to breathe underwater. Where others collapsed, you used the rubble to rebuild. You didn't numb it or skip steps. You did the real work, the raw work, the kind that leaves no shortcuts. And maybe you asked yourself, why did I have to carry it alone? Why didn't anyone show up? The truth is, chosen one, you were never meant to be rescued. You were meant to realize that your rescue was always within. That's why you're not bitter now. That's why you don't fake smile your way through healing. You're sharper, cleaner, unshakable, because you became your own counselor, your own protector, your own savior. They expected a victim. You came out as a weapon. Now they stare, confused. They can't find the scars they were waiting to laugh at. All they see is the glow pain birthed in you. You don't explain it. You don't brag. You carry peace so loud it silences rooms. That's why it worked. Because you didn't make pain your identity. You made it your turning point. Number 5. You let silence do the talking, and elevation became the loudest revenge. They wanted you in the mud throwing stones, but instead you built a mountain they can't climb. You had every chance to clap back, every opportunity to blast names, spill evidence, fire off words that would scorch their reputation, and yet you didn't. Not because you were weak, not because you didn't feel the sting, but because you understood the real game. Revenge is noisy, but elevation is permanent. They wanted chaos, you chose class. They wanted mud, you chose altitude. And now they're choking on the thin air you're breathing at the top. Imagine someone trying to block the sun with their hands. They can flail, they can sweat, they can curse, but the sun doesn't argue. It just keeps rising until their hands collapse in exhaustion. That was you. You never had to fight back with their tactics. You let truth rise, and now it's blinding them. Time is the courtroom where lies collapse on their own. They thought your silence meant guilt. They thought your refusal to respond meant defeat. But you knew the truth doesn't need a press release. It just needs time and space. And while they were burning calories holding up their fake version of events, you were quietly stacking wins. Now their masks are slipping without you lifting a finger. And maybe you asked yourself, but don't I deserve to expose them? Yes, you did. You had the ammo, but you also had wisdom, because if you had stooped to their level, they would have pointed at you and said, "See? Just like us." By refusing, you protected your spirit, and that protection became promotion. Elevation exposes lies faster than rage ever could. Now your life itself is the clapback. Your glow is the proof. Your peace is the argument. You don't need to explain a thing. They can see it. And that's what stings them the most. The fact that you didn't need revenge to win. You let growth, time, and purpose do the work. That's why it worked. That's why you won. Number 6. You became the proof that unseen strategy looks like madness to the crowd. They thought you were lost in the dark, but really you were mapping a route they can't even read. From the outside, it looked like you were fading. You stopped showing up in familiar spaces. You didn't post, didn't announce, didn't share. You became distant, private, quiet. And to them, that meant weakness. They assumed you were slipping, losing, failing. But what they couldn't see was that you were right in the middle of a higher strategy, one that never makes sense to people who only understand noise and instant results. Imagine a chess master pausing before the next move. To the impatient eye, it looks like hesitation. To the trained eye, it's the winning play being calculated. That was you. You weren't retreating, you were positioning. You weren't falling back, you were fortifying. Every step had to be led, not forced. Every boundary placed with precision, not explained for applause. You couldn't afford distractions. You couldn't keep feeding the same cycles and expect a breakthrough. Silence isn't retreat, it's preparation. They called it arrogance because you stopped being available. They called it fear because you didn't jump at every offer. They called it loss because you chose stillness over the spotlight. But you knew better. You were under instructions they couldn't decode. The restraint it took to not react, not defend, not prove, that's a discipline they'll never understand. You weren't hiding, you were aligning. And maybe you've wondered, was I wrong to pull back? Did I lose my momentum? What felt like a pause was a launch sequence. Rockets look still on the pad before they break the atmosphere. Seeds look dead underground before they explode into life. The world calls it madness. History calls it timing. Now the results are showing. Doors are opening without effort. Opportunities are finding you without chase. None of it adds up on paper, and that's the point. Favor never fits formulas. You are living proof that what's built in silence doesn't need defending when it appears. You didn't follow their map. You followed your own. That's why it worked. That's why you won. Because you trusted the unseen over their opinions. And now the outcome is blowing their minds. Number 7. Your hidden radar was the blade they never saw coming. They were busy setting traps while you were quietly dismantling the map. They thought they were playing chess while you were still learning checkers. They imagined their whispers, bait and manipulation were invisible, that their little moves were so subtle you'd never catch on. They believed they could twist the narrative, drip-feed sabotage, and pull you into an emotional snare. But what they didn't know was that you were carrying a weapon they couldn't detect. Discernment. Silent, sharp, surgical. Imagine a submarine gliding under the surface while sonar scans every inch of the ocean. The ship above can't see it, but the submarine sees everything. That was you. They thought you were blind because you didn't react. But you were tracking every shift, every fake smile, every hidden motive. You didn't need receipts or screenshots. Your intuition read the room long before the proof showed up. Awareness beats manipulation every time. Maybe you asked yourself, why don't I feel the need to clap back anymore? Am I getting soft? You were getting precise. You weren't operating from ego. You were moving with clarity. You spoke when necessary, held your tongue when it was power, and walked away without warning because you already saw the ending. That wasn't fear, that was strategy. They expected you to stumble into their traps, but you kept stepping out of reach. That wasn't luck. That was training, years of reading energy, of trusting your own instincts, of refusing to ignore the quiet warnings most people overlook. You learned to protect your peace like a bank protects its vault. And every time you refused to engage, you grew stronger. They wanted drama, you gave them distance. They wanted confusion, you gave them clarity. While they were exhausting themselves trying to provoke you, you were elevating in silence. They mistook your calm for weakness, but it was the stillness of a sniper's aim. By the time they realized they couldn't outthink you, you were already gone. Unbothered, unreachable, victorious. Your discernment wasn't just defense, it was your compass guiding you through every hidden snare. That's why you kept winning, even when you said nothing at all. Number 8, you walked through the flames and came out wearing armor they can't melt. They built the fire to burn you down, but all they did was forge you into steel. They thought the heartbreak, the betrayal, the pressure, the endless warfare would finally reduce you to dust, and truth be told, it almost did. But here's what they didn't count on. Instead of turning into ash, you turned into armor. You didn't just survive the flames, you let them shape you. The same battles designed to end you ended up engineering you into someone untouchable. Imagine gold inside a furnace. At first, the heat looks like destruction, but it's actually refinement. The impurities burn away, and what comes out on the other side is more valuable than before. That was you. Every sleepless night, every silent battle, every breakdown that didn't finish you off was just heat perfecting your edges. The version of you they're still attacking doesn't exist anymore. And maybe you've asked yourself, why don't I react the same anymore? Why doesn't this chaos shake me like it used to? Because you've been rewired. The storms that once left you on the floor now barely touch you. You don't panic over shadows. You don't beg for reassurance. You don't crumble when pressure rises. The weak version of you they depended on is gone, erased by fire, replaced by someone fireproof. Now, people keep trying to press buttons that don't even exist anymore. They're fighting a ghost. They're arguing with a past version that died in the furnace. And what confuses them most is your calm. They mistake it for arrogance, for pride, for detachment. But it isn't. It's clarity. It's strength. It's the knowing that you've faced worse and walked out breathing. The fire they thought would consume you ended up crowning you. You endured pain most people would run from. You confronted shadows most people would bury. And because you didn't run, because you stayed, because you learned, you became unshakable. Not cold, not numb, just stronger. You've seen the depths of darkness, and that's why you no longer fear it. You walk through it now with power, with discernment, with authority. The flames failed, the weapons failed. You're still standing, but you're not the same. You're stronger, sharper, unbreakable. You're fireproof, and no strike against you makes even a dent anymore. Number 9. They tried to bury you in shame, but you turned it into the foundation of your throne. They thought humiliation would shrink you, but it became the soil that grew your empire. They believed their mockery would crush you. They thought disrespect, exclusion, and whispers behind closed doors would finally fold you in half. And yes, it stung. It left bruises, scars that reminded you of how cruel people can be. But instead of letting the shame rot you, you let it refine you. Instead of turning bitter, you turned wise. Imagine a seed pressed deep into dirt. At first, it looks like burial. It looks like the end. But that burial is what gives it the conditions to sprout. That was you. The humiliation that was meant to bury your worth ended up planting you in deeper soil where you grew roots no storm could touch. Pride wins moments. Humility builds empires. You didn't let humiliation destroy your sense of self. You let it strip away illusions, the need to please, the urge to perform, the hunger for claps. You discovered who you really were when no one was watching. And that kind of clarity? That's priceless. Most people let humiliation harden them into bitterness, but you let it soften you into depth. Not weakness, but wisdom. You stopped chasing shallow approval and started pursuing real alignment. And maybe you asked yourself, why did I have to go through that? Why did it have to be so public, so painful? Because humiliation was the furnace where your ego burned off. Without it, you might have stayed addicted to applause. With it, you learned to stand on your own foundation, steady, grounded, untouchable. They thought they handed you shame. They really handed you bricks. You weren't building from revenge. You weren't even building to prove them wrong. You were building from purpose. Every rejection, every tear, every letdown became a brick you quietly stacked into walls of strength. While they were laughing, you were laying foundations. While they were gossiping, you were growing. And now, without realizing it, they've been forced to watch you build something permanent out of what was meant to break you. That's why your victory feels different. It isn't loud. It isn't about flexing. It's about peace, wholeness, and evolution. They thought humiliation was your grave. They didn't know it was the ground for your throne. Number 10. You stopped knocking on doors because you became the room everyone wants to enter. They chased invitations while you became the reason people built the table. You never begged for entry. You didn't claw at locked gates or twist yourself into shapes just to be noticed. While others were exhausting themselves for access, you stayed quiet and worked on becoming. You healed, you aligned, you evolved. And in that stillness you became the key, not just to open doors, but to redefine what doors even are. Imagine a magnet. It doesn't chase metal, it doesn't shout, it doesn't push. It simply is what it is, and everything aligned with it comes closer. That was you. While others were trying to sell their worth, you were building yours. While they rehearsed performances, you were becoming real. That's why the rooms started whispering your name. That's why opportunities are circling you now without you lifting a finger. Access isn't given to the loudest voice. It belongs to the clearest presence. Maybe you've wondered, how did I get here without forcing it? Why are doors opening now that used to stay shut? Because you stopped chasing. You stopped trying to convince people to value you. And in that release, your energy recalibrated. You shifted from desperation to discernment, and that shift made you magnetic. Now your presence carries weight. You walk into spaces and the atmosphere tilts, not because you demanded it, but because your growth prepared you for it. The same people who once ignored you are circling back, but you're not desperate anymore. You're selective. You know who you are, and that knowing makes you untouchable. You didn't wait to be chosen. You became undeniable. That's what terrifies them. They work tirelessly to force doors open, to push themselves into places they weren't ready for. You didn't. You became the reason doors swing open naturally. You didn't force access. You became access. You stopped knocking, and now you are the sound that makes others open up. This is why this season feels different. The wins are rooted, permanent, and natural. You didn't hustle your way into a seat. You became the room everyone wants to enter. And that's why, Chosen One, it worked. You didn't force it. You became it. Number 11. You outgrew applause and claimed authority they can't take back. Crowds can clap one day and crucify you the next. So why build your worth on noise that shifts with the wind? You didn't lose when you stepped back from the spotlight. You leveled up. They thought your silence meant defeat, but really it meant you no longer needed their validation. You saw what most people miss. Applause is fragile. It can be bought, faked, or ripped away the second you stop entertaining. But authority, real authority, the kind born from endurance, scars, and unshakable alignment, can't be given by anyone and can't be taken away by anyone. Imagine a tree with deep roots. The storm may strip branches and scatter leaves, but the roots hold firm. That's authority. You became rooted in who you are, not in who was clapping. And because of that, you move differently now. You don't defend your silence. You don't justify your process. You weren't chasing viral relevance. You were climbing vertically, step by step, into something unshakable. Validation makes you fragile. Authority makes you unmovable. There were seasons when it looked like you had disappeared. People whispered that you'd quit, that you had nothing going on. But in the background, you were stacking weight they couldn't measure. Wisdom, discipline, peace, resilience. You weren't overlooked. You were being fortified. What looked like nothing was the most important something. And maybe you've asked yourself, why doesn't it bother me anymore when people ignore me? Because you've outgrown applause. You've realized circles built on shallow approval will never hold the weight of your destiny. You stopped auditioning for a seat at the table and started building tables of your own. Now, when the spotlight hits, you don't fold, you carry it. Your authority stabilizes you in rooms that ego would collapse in. That's what they can't process. You don't care about being liked, you care about being aligned. You don't need the crowd's recognition because your confidence comes from what you survived, not who's watching. They were auditioning for attention. You were appointed in silence. That's why you win, because you don't chase audiences anymore. You carry authority, and that's something no applause can ever revoke. Number 12, you didn't just survive the grind, you turned it into your blueprint. Most people stumble through the fire. You studied the flames until they became your map. You weren't just dragged through the process, you dissected it. You treated every setback like a classroom, every delay like a lesson plan. Where others saw wasted time, you saw hidden instructions. That's the difference. You weren't going through it, you were growing through it. And that's why you've come out different from anyone who's tried to walk your path. Think of steel in a forge. Some metal bends under pressure, twisting into useless shapes. But the strongest steel absorbs the heat, learns from it, and emerges unbreakable. That was you. You didn't let frustration turn you bitter. You let patience turn you precise. You didn't whine. You watched. You studied. You paid attention to what the universe was showing you in silence. Survival is getting through. Mastery is transforming through. Maybe you've asked yourself, why did it take so long? Why couldn't it have been easier? The truth, if it had been easy, you'd still be fragile. The process wasn't punishment, it was preparation. It stripped off false skins, broke toxic cycles, sharpened your instincts. You weren't just waiting for a blessing, you were being built into someone who could carry it without crumbling. While most people kill time in bitterness, you used time as a weapon. You healed where others hid. You broke patterns others repeated. You rewired your mind, fortified your spirit, and became sharper than anyone expected. That's not surviving, that's mastery. You stopped asking, why me? And started asking, what is this teaching me? That question became your crown. Now people look at you and can't figure it out. Why are you calm when storms hit? Why are you grounded when chaos erupts? It's because you did the work. You didn't take shortcuts. You didn't fake the healing. You sat in the furnace and let it refine you, piece by piece. That's why what's coming won't slip through your fingers. You're not just ready to receive. You're ready to sustain, protect, and expand. You didn't survive the process. You mastered it, and that mastery has made you unstoppable. Number 13. You turned letting go into the sharpest power, move they never saw coming. They mistook your surrender for weakness, but it was the silence before the avalanche. They thought you lost your edge when you stopped forcing things. They thought your calm meant confusion, your patience meant paralysis. But while they were exhausting themselves, pushing, pulling, and panicking, you were mastering the art of release. You stopped trying to bend the world to your will. You stopped begging doors to open. You let go, and that's exactly why everything started coming to you. Imagine a river. The water doesn't fight its way around every stone. It flows with gravity until it carves entire valleys. That was you. You stopped wrestling with outcomes and started aligning with timing. You chose clarity over urgency, stillness over noise. And while they called you passive, what you were really doing was conserving power. Control is fragile, alignment is unshakable. Maybe you wondered, if I stop pushing, will everything fall apart? But the opposite happened. The moment you released control, pieces started clicking on their own. People who overlooked you circled back. Opportunities you thought were gone returned. Not forced, not faked, but natural, undeniable, real. They can't figure it out. How did you stay calm when things looked like they were collapsing? How did you know to wait when everyone else was scrambling? The truth is, you weren't depending on noise. You were trusting the deeper current. And that insight, not panic, not manipulation, became your ultimate strategy. They were clawing at doors. You became the reason doors swung open. That's why it all worked. Because surrender wasn't you giving up. It was you stepping into a higher frequency they can't operate in. While they drained themselves trying to control every outcome, you flowed. And the flow carried you farther than force ever could. Now your life speaks louder than explanations. The glow, the calm, the unshakable strength. It wasn't bought, it wasn't borrowed, it was forged in silence. You didn't just survive, you transcended. You didn't just win, you became the win. And that's why you're unstoppable now. Not by chance, but by alignment. Not by noise, but by mastery. So, chosen one, now you see it clearly. Whatever you did, it worked. You won, and it's already yours. Every delay, every setback, every silent battle was part of the setup that made you unstoppable. Let the doubters wonder. Let the enemies choke on their confusion, because your life is now the proof they can't deny. And if this message lit something inside you, press the like button if you haven't already. And if you're still not part of this family, make sure to hit subscribe. Stay connected, because your rise is only just beginning.